Good afternoon, everybody, or wherever you're located, whatever time of day it is there. In this video, I'm going to talk about paranoia and how I've dealt with it. Now, in my previous video I did about anxiety, I talked about anxiety being a type of fear, and it's often a fear that's projected into the future. We're thinking about it, and I did a bit of thinking about this whilst on LSD, is that it appears to me that paranoia is actually based on what you think is actually happening in the present. So for instance, some people might get paranoid that people are thinking something about them, or they're going to attack them, or they're breaking into their home, or many things really. That's only one aspect obviously of paranoia I'm just talking about. But the thing is, it's a perceived thing that you think is happening right now. The paranoia itself, whatever the delusion might be, you really do think is happening at this moment. And it is a fear. And people respond on that fear. As we know, some people can be violent in a psychotic paranoid state, such as a paranoid schizophrenic. And I have schizoaffective disorder, so I sort of know what that feels like to have the paranoia and the fear that's associated with that sometimes. But I actually found that with the technique that I sort of found through having paranoia, that I've actually seemed to have overcome it reasonably well. And it does come up from time to time, but it's so limited now, and I seem to have quite a lot of power over it. And to me, personally at least, it seems to be a lot easier to overcome paranoia than it does any other sort of neuroses. And the way I discovered this was actually through when I started taking marijuana again, only probably just a few months ago really. And the reason I actually started to do that was because I actually have chronic back pain, and I wasn't able to get any kind of relief from that pain using just normal over-the-counter medications. There was one in Australia called Endone, and it's some sort of oxycontin or whatever it is. So it's something you can't have all the time. It was effective. It didn't actually last that well in terms of once I'd had it. However, it did work, and I didn't really want to obviously get addicted, and obviously it's hard to get anyway because the doctors don't particularly want you to get addicted either here in Australia. So I did hear about people using marijuana to ease their pain, and I thought, well, I'll give that a try. Marijuana is actually illegal in Australia at the moment, and they're looking more, at least in my state, to legalising the medicinal marijuana, the one that's got the more of the CBD, I think, rather than the THC. But even that, it will only be restricted to certain people who have certain conditions, so I would be ruled out of that. So I wasn't going to accept that. And when you're in pain, and you want some relief, and I've done everything I possibly can to do that. But anyway, getting off a bit off track there. So the point is, I actually was able to get these edible marijuanas, which were a type of caramel. And now I hadn't had marijuana for about 17 years, I think, at the time I had one of these again, and I didn't have a full one, so I only had, I think, about a quarter from recollection when I first had one. It may have been a half, but I think it may have been around maybe just over a quarter. And when it kicked in, it was very, very strong for me. And since then, I've had quite a few of those now, and they've helped an awful lot with my pain. And I've gotten used to that sort of high now, and I'm actually much better. But I was in the garage at the time when I'd had this first one, and I've got music, or speakers should I say, set up all through the house. So it doesn't matter which room you walk into, whether it's the bathroom or any of the bedrooms, the kitchen, outside, or in the garage. As you walk through, there's always a speaker playing the same thing. So if you're listening to something, whatever it might be, you don't have any discontinuation of listening to that, because that used to frustrate me. So I was in the garage and I had the music on, and then I started to hear voices coming out of the speakers. Now, the thing is, with my particular mental condition too, is that a lot of people get very lost in their psychosis. And it was felt like a slight psychosis, wasn't a full-on one, but I was sort of more alert or wise enough to know that the voice I was hearing weren't real, but it was starting to freak me out a little bit. So I turned the music off just because I got the volume control on the speaker too in the garage. And I became very fascinated about that, because the next few times after I had taken these edible marijuana type things, was I had similar things where the paranoia would come up at different times, and there was often a fear that someone was breaking into the house and they were gonna get me, they were gonna stab me as well. And anyway, as I said, I do get very curious about the things that happens to me in my mind, because it's interesting where it comes from. And as soon as I identified all these things as being fears, then I thought, what are these fears really about? And I thought, well, the fear of someone breaking in, the ultimate fear is that they're going to kill you. When I thought about it logically, I thought, well, I mean, not saying it couldn't happen, but it's highly unlikely. So I thought about it in a logical way, but that really wasn't it that I got to it. I mean, that is definitely one aspect that you could try yourself, is to think the best you can logically. Think, how likely is this to be really happening? And I know that with a mental condition, for most people, that's, probably near impossible for a lot of people. And I'm not really sure why I have that ability to do that. I've only ever heard someone else ever speak similar to the way their condition is, in terms of when psychosis is coming, as I do, that you're kind of aware that it's happening to you. You don't just get lost in it straight away, where some people seem to. So then I thought, well, and this again comes to a lot of the philosophy I think I read, and I listen to an awful lot of Eastern philosophy, or read a lot of Eastern philosophy too, is that I thought, well, there's nothing ultimately to be afraid of. And this probably ties back to as well a day back in September last year, when I was just having a bit of time in the garden. It was just coming into spring and a nice warm morning, and I was just meditating, and I had a quite amazing experience that felt like, from reading, it sounded like an enlightenment experience. Whether it was or not, I don't know, but it certainly felt like it, because I was in a state of bliss for a very long time afterwards. And also since that time too, a lot of my fears have gone. But I remember from that time though, that I did realize there's nothing to really be afraid of fundamentally in life. There's no fear of, to be afraid of death or what you're going to eat or where you're going to go or anything like that. I'm sort of not afraid in many aspects now. So that, I think, was a big part of that too. But when I thought about it, when I was lying in bed one time thinking, oh, I'm sure someone's breaking in, they're probably going to get me, all this stuff, I thought, well, so what? So, okay, say this is it. Let's just pretend they're going to come in and they're just going to stab you in the stomach and you're going to die. I know it sounds pretty morbid and pretty horrific, and I mean, it would be, wouldn't it? But the thing is that I confront these fears now. I was like, well, okay, if the brain wants to do this to me, say, put all these little fantasies in my head, whether it's anxiety based or whether it's the paranoia based, I think, well, I'll just take it right through. Let's just pretend. And I imagine, I think, okay, let's really get to the bottom of this fear. Let's imagine what it is that you really, really fear so much. And let's get to the ultimate state of the worst thing that you could possibly imagine in that paranoia of what could happen. And it's funny by doing that though, I can't be very clear on what happens through doing that. But for me, and I know this probably wouldn't be for everybody, this particular technique, it might, in some cases it might make things worse for people, I don't know. But for me, using a logical brain, I just came to an acceptance of these things, that, well, things happen in life, and of course if someone did break in, I would do my best to defend myself. I'm not going to lie there, but the thing is, if things happen and you die, well, I'm not attaching myself to my life. I mean, because in a way I realized through reading Eastern philosophy is that you really can't hold on to your life anyway. You will eventually go. I mean, ideally I'd like to live for a lot longer and enjoy things. That would be ideal, of course. But I may get struck down with a terrible disease or cancer or something like that, and I might die for that. So you don't really know when you're going to die or necessarily how. So there's a level of acceptance in that for me now. It's, well, if something happens, it happens, and sometimes you just can't do a lot about certain aspects of things that happen to you. But I can change the way I think about it, and I did talk about that a little bit in my anxiety video. So what I can do is just, look at that and think, well, I'll just accept things as they are. And, I remember hearing once, I think it may have been from Alan Watts perhaps, where he spoke about types of monks once upon a time, something to do with brigands or something, I can't remember what it was exactly. But he said that the warriors used to come along and they would threaten the monks to see if they could scare them. And they wouldn't be scared. So they'd hold their sword to them or whatever and see if they'd flinch, but they had such calmness, such peace. And the thing was, the warriors were quite impressed by this, because they thought that is something that even they don't have. That's the ultimate courage of a warrior, that even as they are warriors, they don't have that. And I'm not saying I have exactly that type of courage 100%, but certainly seems to be changing in me in some way. So getting back to the point of paranoia, is that when you just play along with it, say, okay, yep, sure, I'm sure that's happening. Or, okay, then what? Then what? Then what? You just keep playing through. You think, okay, so then what? If that happens, then what? Just play into it and keep questioning yourself and get to the bottom of your fears. And that's the same sort of technique I use in everything in my life, not just to do with fear, but everything. I think, well, everything that I seem to suffer from mentally, I try to let it go, but the way I sort of do that is by confronting it and questioning it and think, okay, what's the worst that can happen? And once I get to that state, it just seems to disappear. So it's a very interesting thing, and I think that when I look at it and what I've been able to achieve in my own mind through doing these sort of things, is that I don't think that from my experience with psychologists and psychiatrists, they really have a clear idea on perhaps the best way to do this. And I have looked at the CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy before, and I understand that helps with some people. For me, I didn't find it useful whatsoever. And I've even gone down the path with the psychiatric route they like to push the pills on you constantly. And I'm not a fan of that, because did that for about 10 years. Really, it really is a band-aid. And as much as they may understand in scientific things how certain aspects of these drugs work on the brain, there is a lot they don't understand. I know that, because I've spoken to a lot of people in the industry who admit that. They have some idea, but not entirely. And which will bring me on to another video I'll do, another aspect to do with voices in the head. And I have a theory on that, which sounds a bit out there, and I'm not saying that it is this, but I'll probably do that in the next video about voices. But the paranoia, it really is a fear of what you think is happening, but it's a fantasy again. It's not real. It's not real. So the two things that I sort of suggest there is what I was saying through this video, is to sort of sum it up, is to use a logical mind and think, how likely is this thing to be really happening? And as I said, I understand that somebody who is in a psychotic episode is not necessarily going to be able to do that. And the other thing is to sort of take these fears right through, because it is a fear. Think, well, what's the worst that can happen? But don't be afraid of it. That's the thing. You need to learn to not be afraid in life, because there really is nothing to be afraid of. Things happen to you all the time, and the ultimate thing that can happen to you, the worst thing ever, if people really take it through, is you die. But then once you're dead, you're dead. And I'm not going to talk about theories after that. I'm just talking about in terms of your physical body. So, but anything beyond that, of course, you're not going to want to be tortured or anything like that, but we're talking about, as I said in my last video, the fear of, say, being homeless or not having food or being ostracized by people. Once you learn to, and it is practice, it is a real practice about this, and that's why it's very important to spend time in contemplation and in building yourself up in your own mind and your own thoughts, validating yourself. That way you can, find this sort of freedom and peace in yourself, this contentment. And I really do think that is something that everybody's really going after in their life, is contentment. It's just that people go through it looking for it in different ways, often turning to drugs or alcohol to try and escape themselves, which obviously does not work. Or they might think that gaining a lot of money and buying things will find that contentment, which we know that often doesn't last for very long. And always looking at something from outside themselves. But that's probably another video too. So trying to keep it back here on the paranoia. So another aspect of the paranoia that I had been thinking about a little while ago, and I wrote something about it, was just a thought, a theory, was that it seemed to me that paranoia also seems to be a very primal thing. As if, you hear sounds and then you get super alert. And I'm thinking that perhaps the reason for that might be an evolutionary one, is that once we needed to have that keen, attuned sense to danger. But paranoia seems to be completely out of whack with that. And, your own mind does play into that quite a lot. So basically, if you do hear sounds, and often I know that people who do get paranoid, if they hear sounds, they freak out sometimes. And so basically, as I was saying before, earlier in the video here, is if you learn to face the fear and then ask yourself, what do you really think it is? What do you really think this sound is? Do you really think someone's breaking in? What do you think this monstrous sound is, this scary sound? What is so scary about it? What is the projection that you're getting in this present moment that you think is about to happen? Do you really think someone has broken in? And if so, what do you think they want to break in for? I mean, do you really think it's very logical that they've broken in? What are the chances of that? You got to try and shine some sort of light on the fear. I mean, the thing is with the paranoia too, even if the thing that you really think is happening, I mean, even if it is real, does it really matter depending on what it is? This is the thing about finding the contentment in your mind. And you need to do that, as I said, through contemplation and addressing these fears. When they come up, you got to think about it, get curious about yourself. I mean, another paranoia too is obviously when people think that people are thinking things about them. There's sort of an insecurity there, and that's why it's very important, again, to build yourself up within yourself, your own self-confidence and self-assurance, and just be content with yourself and what you do. And I know that's very hard for a lot of people, and I'm not sure that every single person in the world has the capability to do that, to be honest. I know through reading to do with Nietzsche, he talked about that too, about people being by themselves, because he was talking about that one man, I think he said something like, one man runs to his neighbor looking for himself, another runs to his neighbor trying to find himself. And I think he said something like, your bad love of yourselves makes solitude a prison to you, or something like that anyway. So basically what he's getting at is that people can't seem to sit in silence by themselves. And I think that's very, very true, because many people get into, say they get into the car, they straight away turn on the radio, whether it's music or listening to someone talking, or when they're at home, they're often putting on television or videos or music again, or on the computer playing games. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of these things whatsoever. What I'm trying to say is that it's very important to spend some time in your day, if you can, in silence, by yourself, contemplation, nothing else on, not reading anything, doing nothing, not drawing, nothing, just sit. Contemplate things in life, think about your own life. And another thing though, a part of that is perhaps try not to reflect too strongly on societal type pressures if you can. I'll probably do a video on that, because that's a pretty big thing in itself. But just try and contemplate on the things that you fear in life, because honestly, if you can get some sort of sovereignty over your fear, you'll find a lot of peace and contentment in your life, and a lot of things will change like you wouldn't believe. I blow myself away all the time. I was talking to my friend on the weekend. I said, I can't believe the calmness that I have in life so much now. I said, it just blows myself away. I cannot believe how calm I am. And it's not to say that I don't still get anxiety or paranoia trying to come up, but as I said, I've got different techniques now that seem to really get on top of them a lot. And I still get depression, and I still get manic behaviors that come up, or even hypermanic ones. And in fact, I started this channel when I was hypermanic, looking back, which is why it's perhaps a little bit rushed at the first few videos. And it wasn't a major thing, like a full manic thing, but looking back, I can see the behavior now, and that was only one aspect. So I'd like, if you would, for you to help yourself with in terms of the paranoia, just to try that, even before the paranoia hits in, is do the thing I'm saying, is to contemplate your fears already, and perhaps even write something down that you can even look at if you do sense any kind of paranoia. Just to write down, so you look at, is this logical? How likely is this to happen? And if it is real and is really happening, what's the worst that can happen? And the ultimate worst thing that can happen is really death. Essentially, that's what a lot of people are afraid of. But I mean, even people clinging on to all their things. If someone broke into my home and said, I'm going to steal all your stuff, I'd say, okay, take it, fine. No attachment to those things is a great thing. So I have some insurance anyway, but even if I didn't, I don't need the things to be content. Anyway, I've gone off a little bit on the track there. I said a little while ago there I was going to wrap this video up, and I'm going to do that now. So if you have any of your own sort of questions, or even points on how you sort of perhaps deal with the paranoia, I'd love to hear them in the comment section. I know that in our world with psychiatry that they treat it with drugs. And as I said, I've done that, and I'm not interested in it anymore for myself. And I'm not telling anybody not to do that, because if it's helping you and you're finding that fine, well, continue. But for my own personal thing, I didn't want to do that anymore for all sorts of reasons. So anyway, I hope you found some use in this particular video, and I look forward to hearing your responses.